What are some true scary experiences that you Redditors have been through? Creepy strangers, unexplainable incidents, narrow misses, etc. I once found myself in a cave, along with 8 or 9 other people. It was the middle of the Pennsylvania wilderness, and the only entrance was a small hole in the ground. To enter, you had to sit on your ass, grab a tree root, and drop about 7 feet down a steep wall to the floor. We all dropped in, and spent at least half an hour exploring this cave. My friend Dan taps me on the shoulder and whispers, "Dude, look at the ceiling." The ceiling was just high enough above our heads to hide the thousands of spiders crawling around on it. We tried to keep quiet about it, because we didn't want anyone to flip out, but there was no stopping it. Just seconds later the whole group noticed them. Everyone got silent, and you could actually hear the spiders crawling on the surface of the stone. It was an extra nerve-wracking situation, because the only way to exit the cave was to basically jump up and pull yourself out of a hole surrounded by spiders. 2 of the girls with us were terrified and refused to climb out. They just couldn't muster the courage to put their faces next to a giant spider nests. They came around though, and everyone got out safe. I had the honor of being the last one to exit, alone in a dark cave filled with spiders, and nobody around to give me a boost. Fortunately, Dan was brave enough to reach down in and give me a hand. When we first discovered that cave, we were all like, "I can't believe we've never heard of this place." Now I know why. That cave sucks. A few months later, I found out the cave is off limits in the fall because of the rattlesnakes. Fuck that cave. When I was about 12, I had a lot of issues with night terrors and rarely slept a whole night through. One night, I got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. I sat down, half asleep and thinking of nothing but emptying my bladder and going back to bed, when I see movement out of the corner of my eye. There was a man standing by the other door to the bathroom staring at me, not moving. He was wearing a tattered grey jumpsuit and had a crutch, little to no hair. I don't remember how I got down into the basement where my parents slept, but suddenly there I was, hysterical. My dad finally went up and looked in the bathroom and kitchen. Saw nothing but allowed me to sleep on the couch down there anyway. I didn't fall back asleep. About an hour or so later, I heard the sliding door to the bathroom from my sister's room and limping footsteps. The next morning my dad searched around and noticed that the fridge and pantry had been raided. Never caught the guy. I used to work graveyards at a Circle K in a northern CA college town. CA law states that no alcohol can be sold between 2 to 6 am. At about 2:45 am, a couple of guys come into the store, go to the cooler to grab a couple of 18 packs of shit beer. Coors, Keystone, can't remember now. I tell the leader of the duo that it's after 2, I can't sell the beer to him. As he starts getting irate, I offer him a free coffee, soda, candy bar, but I can't sell the beer. Cops and management had been all over our asses for questionable sales. The leader gets the 1,000-yard stare in his eyes and proceeds to start reaching for the small of his back, at which point his buddy says, "Stop, man. It's not worth it." The leader smiled at me and winked and said see you soon, and left. 2 days later I got fired for telling the regional dickhead that 2 people needed to be on at night, and a few other things, so my assistant manager had to cover my shift. That night he was robbed and had the shit knocked out of him by a guy that fit the description of the 2 I'd dealt with a few nights before. TL. Doctor narrowly avoided getting a shotgun shoved in my face, but a friend wound up with it instead. If it makes any difference, I will preface this by saying that I'm female. That fact may or may not make the following creepier. I used to live next to an eye hospital. One day, walking home, I was stopped by an old man who clearly had trouble seeing. He asked me to help him across the road to the hospital. I agreed, and he grabbed hold of my hand very tightly. At this point I noticed his fingers were stained brown from tobacco, covered in scabs, and his fingernails were very long and dirty. I started to think that my good deed for the day would be a bit regrettable. When we got to the other side of the road he still had my hand grasped so tightly I couldn't politely pull away. "Do you want to see my eye?" he said. One of his eyes was squeezed shut. With his free hand he pulled the lids apart, and I realized to my horror that he had no eyeball, just an empty socket. I started babbling, still trying to be polite, about how that was very interesting, but I had to go. Then he uttered the immortal words, "Do you want to put your finger in there?" He was pulling really hard on my hand, trying to force my fingers into his empty eye socket. At this point I gave up on politeness and struggled my hand free. It was difficult. He was really strong and just ran for it. I could hear him laughing as I ran off. TL. Dr. Stranger tried to force me to put my fingers in his empty eye socket. Edit. For clarification, yes, I did once post this before on another thread. Sorry if you've read it before. Okay, I got contacts around the time I turned 21, and I had a real phobia of putting things in my eyes. If you live in the US, you know that they won't let you leave the ophthalmologist with your first pair of contacts unless you can put them in at least one time. It took me having to come back 3 days in a row before I could get it right. That's how disturbed I was about it, but I was determined to have contacts. Anyways, I was real careful about rubbing my eyes with them in, because I had this paranoid fear that I would grind them into my eyes. I know. Like I said, I had a real phobia. So, I go to take a bath, and I'm real careful about getting soap in my eyes. Finally, I wash my hair and close my eyes as I douse water on my head. I rub my eyes and open them, and I realize I'm blind. I can see absolutely nothing. I was in a state of sheer terror. I got incredibly still, and all the possibilities were going through my head. How was I going to get out of the bathtub without help? Was this permanent? How was I going to live my life blind? Then the lights came back on. In the 5 seconds, when I had closed my eyes, the power had gone off, and since the bathroom had no window, I'd been in pitch darkness. TL. Doctor, I briefly thought I had gone blind, but it was just a power outage.